December 21, 2026, 7:47 p.m. I was sitting at my desk, finishing up the end-of-year financial statements for the fourth quarter. My phone suddenly buzzed against the wood. The office was virtually empty. Most of my coworkers had already taken off early for Christmas break, and the faint hum of the overhead fluorescent lights made it feel like a clock ticking down to quitting time. George. I glanced at the screen. It was a text from my older sister, Victoria. "We are not doing Christmas with you this year." Before I could even process that, a second message popped up. "We don't need you." I read those two sentences over twice, not because I was in shock, but because I had been waiting for this exact moment for 3 solid months. George. I set my pen down, looked at the screen again, and actually smiled. It wasn't a bitter laugh. It was a genuine, deep sense of relief. Then I typed back just one word: cool. My thumb hovered over the send button for a beat before I added a second line. "So, all my financial obligations to this family end today. My attorney has already been notified. George." I hit send and flipped my phone face down on the desk. Victoria thought she was punishing me. She thought I'd break down, call her back immediately, and desperately beg for her forgiveness, just like I used to. She had no idea that I had laid out a complete game plan 3 months ago, and she definitely couldn't foresee what was coming over the next 24 hours. My name is Hannah Brooks. George. I'm 34 years old, and I work as a senior accountant for a real estate investment firm in downtown Denver. I live alone in a modest 1-bedroom apartment in the Capitol Hill neighborhood. I have a solid job, a reliable sedan, and a savings account I've built up dollar by dollar over the last decade. On paper, I am the absolute definition of responsible. George. But within my family, I played a completely different role. I was their emergency fund. I was their credit safety net. I was the silent, unpaid backer behind everyone else's American dream. For 10 long years, whenever things went sideways, I was the one called in to clean up the mess. George. When my parents couldn't keep up with their mortgage, I sent foot-torn $100 every single month like clockwork so they wouldn't lose their home. When Victoria maxed out her credit cards, I covered her minimum payments until she could supposedly get back on her feet. When the whole family wanted to take a vacation to Cancun, I put down the deposit for the hotel. Money they somehow forgot to repay. George. And when Victoria couldn't get approved for an auto loan because of her terrible credit score, I stepped up and co-signed without hesitation. I did all of it because I truly believed that's what family was supposed to do. Make sacrifices, show up, and serve as a safety net no matter the personal cost. George. What I didn't realize back then, or rather, what I refused to admit to myself, was that this generosity was a one-way street. I gave and they took. Over time, that constant drain turned me into something other than a person to them. I had simply become a financial utility. Victoria is 4 years older than me. George. She has a husband named Marcus, 2 young daughters, 7-year-old Lily and 5-year-old Emma, and a beautiful house in Boulder. Everyone in the family raved about how impressive she was for securing that home all on her own. My parents, Richard and Patricia Brooks, treated her like the center of the universe, and the rest of us were just supposed to orbit around her. George. Victoria got all the praise, all the attention, and all the grace when things went wrong. And me? All I got were midnight phone calls asking if I could cover another unexpected expense. 3 months before that Christmas text message, I uncovered a truth that completely changed the trajectory of my life. It was September 15th, the day my faith in my family officially shattered. George. I was getting ready to buy my first home. After years of disciplined saving, I finally had enough for a down payment on a small condo in the Highlands. It wasn't fancy, just a bright little place with a view of the Rockies. But it was going to be entirely mine. The first step in securing a mortgage was pulling my credit report, standard procedure. I expected a spotless record. George. I had never made a late payment in my entire life. I kept one credit card that I paid off every month, and my student loans were long gone. My score should have easily been above 780. The page loaded. I looked at the 3-digit number on the screen and my stomach plummeted. 612. That couldn't be right. I scrolled down furiously, searching for a system error or a glitch that could explain it. Then I saw it. A personal loan for $47,000, opened in October 2022 through Mountain West Credit Union. Status: 63 days past due. And the primary address listed on the account was 4847 Pinewood Drive in Boulder, Colorado. My parents' address, somewhere I hadn't lived since I was 18 years old. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. $47,000. A loan I never took out, tied to an address I hadn't called home in 16 years. My initial thought was identity theft by a stranger. Someone had stolen my social security number and opened an account. It happens all the time. I figured I would file a report, dispute the fraudulent debt, and clear it up. Then, my eyes caught the name listed under the cosigner section. Victoria Marie Callahan. My sister's married name, clearly listed on a loan agreement I had never seen, signed, or authorized. The room seemed to tilt. I leaned heavily against the table to steady myself, trying to convince myself there had to be a logical explanation. Victoria wouldn't do this to me, not to her own sister. But as I tried to rationalize it, a memory flooded back like ice water. 2 years earlier, in October 2022, Victoria had called me with an unusually warm tone. She mentioned needing a quick favor regarding an insurance policy. She claimed she was adding me as a beneficiary on her life insurance and just needed copies of my identification to finalize the paperwork. Standard procedure, she had said at the time. Nothing to worry about. I remember feeling touched back then, because Victoria rarely showed that kind of thoughtfulness. I genuinely thought she cared about me, that I was more than just a backup plan. That weekend, I drove out to her house and handed over my driver's license and my social security card. While she stepped over to the copy machine, I sat in her living room playing with little Lily. There was no life insurance policy. There never had been. Sitting at my dining table, looking at the credit report that proved my sister had forged my signature, it all clicked. She didn't take my personal information for administrative paperwork. She took it to secure $47,000. And with my parents' address tied to all the loan paperwork, there was no way they didn't know. The bank notices and statements were mailed directly to their house. For 2 full years, they watched my credit rating crumble without saying a single word to me. I didn't cry, and I didn't scream. I just sat there as a cold realization settled in my chest. When trust dies, it doesn't happen with a dramatic burst. It simply vanishes, leaving an empty space where belief used to be. The next morning, I called Mountain West Credit Union. I kept my voice measured as I explained that I had never opened the account and requested copies of all the loan documentation. The representative was polite, trained to handle fraud claims, and promised to send the file within 5 to 7 business days. Before hanging up, she said something that confirmed my worst fears. "Ma'am, the file shows a cosigner named Victoria Callahan. Do you know this person?" I held the receiver tightly. "Yes," I said. "She's my sister." The documents arrived on September 22nd. I looked at the envelope for 10 minutes before opening it, staring at the evidence of how complete the betrayal was. The application contained my exact information: SSN, date of birth, employer, annual income. The listed purpose was home renovation and debt consolidation. Every letter had been mailed to my parents' Boulder address. The contact number listed was Victoria's cell, and the email address used my name under a domain I had never registered. Then came the signature page. My name was signed at the bottom. It looked somewhat similar to my writing, but the slant was off and the loops were slightly different. It was a decent forgery, but a forgery nonetheless. Comparing it side by side with my actual driver's license made the discrepancies obvious. Victoria hadn't just stolen my credentials, she had constructed a shadow version of me. a version that supposedly lived at my parents' house and needed $47,000 for property updates on a home I didn't own. I took photographs of every single page and uploaded them to an encrypted cloud folder. Then, I took a step back to evaluate my next move. I didn't call Victoria. Porch. I didn't confront her, and I didn't give her a chance to offer excuses. Instead, I requested full credit reports from all three major bureaus: Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. If there was one fraudulent account, there could easily be others. I needed the full picture before making any decisions. Porch. 2 days later, I found a second account. A retail store card with a $8,000 limit, opened in March 2023, carrying a balance of $6,200 that was 90 days past due. Every purchase had been shipped directly to Victoria's house in Boulder. 3 days after that, a third popped up. A line of credit from Homestead Financial Services for $15,000, opened just 8 months ago. The remaining balance was $14,300, and it had already been sent to a collections agency. I pulled out a notepad and started adding up the figures. Personal loan, $47. Retail credit card, $6,200 line of credit, $14,300 accrued fees and interest, approximately $17,000 total exposure, $84,500. My sister had taken $84,500 using my identity, while my parents' address appeared on every single record. Statements and collection notices had been delivered to their front door for 2 years, and they sat by quietly, without uttering a word to me. They knew. I sat with that reality for a long time. My sister, whom I had helped out of countless financial jams, and my parents, whose mortgage payments I had covered for 5 years, had sat across from me at family dinners, accepted my assistance, celebrated Victoria's achievements, and knowingly allowed my financial future to be dismantled. I could have called law enforcement right then. What Victoria did constituted serious felony offenses: identity theft, forgery, and financial fraud, which carried significant legal consequences. I held off, not out of a desire to shield her, but because I knew how my family operated. If I confronted them without a solid foundation, they would deny it, attempt to twist the narrative, and paint me as the villain. Victoria would play the victim. My mother would defend her. My father would accuse me of causing unnecessary drama, and I would somehow end up being expected to apologize. I had seen that dynamic play out too many times before. So I chose a different path: gather absolute proof, determine the exact scope of the liabilities, and consult a qualified attorney to review my options. The following week, I met with Daniel Reyes, an attorney whose findings made the $84,000 figure look like minor details. Because Victoria hadn't just used my information. She had also misappropriated assets from our parents. And the Boulder house they thought they fully owned, the one I had helped pay for over 5 years, was no longer secure, though they hadn't realized it yet. Daniel Reyes's office was located on the 14th floor of a downtown Denver high-rise. His credentials lined the walls, and his legal background included years as a prosecutor specializing in financial crimes. A colleague who had gone through a complex estate dispute had recommended him, noting that he handled high-stakes cases where family matters and financial assets collided. On September 27th, I walked into his office carrying a thick folder containing the credit bureau reports, the forged loan application, screenshots of Victoria's messages, requesting my documents under false pretenses, and statements for accounts I had never opened. I laid the documents out on his conference table. Daniel reviewed every page systematically without interrupting. He took notes on a notepad, his expression remaining entirely neutral. When he finished, he set his pen down and looked at me directly. "Miss Brooks, these actions constitute felony identity theft, forgery, and financial fraud. If you choose to file a police report today, an investigation would initiate immediately." I knew that was the reality, but hearing it stated plainly made the weight of the situation hit home. "I understand," I replied, Before I take any formal steps, I need to know every detail of where things stand. He nodded steadily. That is a prudent approach. Let's outline the paths available to you. He laid out 4 potential strategies. First was formal legal reporting. I could submit a report to law enforcement, initiating a fraud investigation. My credit profile would eventually be cleared through fraud affidavits, establishing my status as an affected party. The consequence would be direct legal exposure for my sister, public fallout for the family, and severe disruption to her household. Second was civil litigation. I could file a civil suit against Victoria to recover the liabilities and damages. This would legally compel accountability, but civil proceedings are lengthy and expensive, with no guarantee of recovery if the assets aren't liquid. Third was a structured settlement. I could present the documentation to Victoria privately and demand a formal repayment agreement outside of court. However, this approach relied entirely on her voluntary compliance, a risky bet given her history of financial deception. The fourth option was what Daniel called the strategic approach. Continue gathering documentation, map out the full extent of the liabilities, build an airtight case file, and make a decision based on complete information rather than immediate emotion. I want the fourth option, I told him. I need full visibility on everything. Daniel raised an eyebrow slightly. Most people in this position react immediately. Most people haven't spent 34 years navigating this specific family dynamic, I said. If I move prematurely, they will find a way to shift the narrative. I need absolute clarity before I take a step. He leaned back and nodded. All right, let's see what else we can uncover. Over the next 2 weeks, Daniel conducted a deeper search that revealed details I couldn't have accessed on my own, tracing the movement of funds across the fraudulent accounts. The findings went much deeper than I had anticipated. The $47,000 loan from Mountain West Credit Union had been split into 3 transfers. $23,000 went directly into Victoria's personal checking account, $9,000 was withdrawn in cash across multiple branches, and the remaining $15,000 was issued as a cashier's check to a title company in Boulder County. Daniel cross-referenced that payment with public property records. That $15,000 had been used as part of the down payment on Victoria's home, the very house the family praised her for acquiring independently, where she hosted holiday dinners, and for which I had contributed an extra $5,000 as a housewarming gift to be a supportive sister. She used your credentials to secure her property, Daniel noted calmly. And then accepted additional financial gifts from you afterward. I remembered that housewarming party clearly. Victoria had looked at my check and remarked, "Is this all? I thought you might help cover the backyard landscaping too." I had actually felt guilty for not offering more at the time. Seeing the paper trail made the dynamic completely clear. In her mind, she had already taken what she wanted, and my additional gifts were just extras. The retail card statements showed $6,000 spent on home furnishings, appliances, and decor. All delivered to her Boulder address on dates matching her social media posts showing off her renovated space. Then Daniel brought up another detail. We also need to look at your parents' situation. What about them? I asked. He pulled up another file. All 3 accounts used their address as the primary residence. Mail, statements, and default notices were sent there. To secure the primary loan, utility bills in your name were submitted to confirm residency. Part of me wanted to believe my parents were unaware, but the documentation disproved that idea. They had permitted the use of their address, received the statements, and watched the liabilities accumulate without raising a question. Daniel looked at me carefully as the facts sank in. Whether through active participation or deliberate avoidance, they allowed the arrangement to continue at their address. From a legal standpoint, neither option changes the reality of the paper trail. A memory from Thanksgiving 2022 came back to me. It was about a month after the initial loan had been approved. We were all at my parents' house in Boulder. During dinner, my mother had made a comment that seemed casual then, but took on a completely different meaning in hindsight. Victoria has finally gotten her finances organized, she had said. She's showing real responsibility. My father had nodded along, adding, sometimes people just need a little extra room to get on track. I had assumed they were referring to general progress. In reality, they were fully aware of the funds coming in. They just didn't care where those funds were being drawn from. Daniel brought my focus back. Proving direct legal intent for your parents would require further evidence, but the environment enabled the entire process. They received mail that wasn't theirs, observed spending that didn't match reported income, and chose not to inquire. We spent the rest of the meeting outlining a strategy. Daniel advised me to maintain the minimum payments on the accounts temporarily to prevent them from going into active legal collection, which would alert Victoria prematurely. Moving forward, I was to document every interaction, save every message, and maintain standard communication without revealing what I had discovered. So I keep quiet for now? I asked. He nodded. You protect your position by letting them assume nothing has changed. It requires patience, but it ensures you keep control of the outcome. So that's what I did. Over the next month, I attended routine family gatherings. I listened politely while Victoria discussed her home projects, and my mother complimented her taste. While the adults talked about holiday plans, I spent time with my nieces in the yard. All the while, I kept precise records and monitored the situation. They had no idea. When they looked at me, they still saw the quiet, dependable relative who could always be counted on to step in. They didn't see the legal folder accumulating on my counter, the detailed correspondence with my attorney, or the steady shift in how I viewed my obligations to them. On October 25th, my mother called with a specific request. We're changing up Christmas this year, she announced. Victoria is going to host at her house. It's time she took on that role. Then came the expectation. We need you to handle the financial side for the event. Victoria's budget is tight after the home updates, so if you could cover the catering and deal for the gifts for the girls, that would help immensely. The requested amount came out to roughly $3,000. To cover a holiday event hosted by my sister at a property purchased in part with unauthorized debt in my name. I told her I would check my budget before committing. After hanging up, I sat quietly for a long time. They were asking me to fund a celebration in a house built on my stolen credit. It highlighted a fundamental reality. Victoria's actions were part of a broader pattern within the family dynamic, where my value was measured almost entirely by what I could provide. The moment that solidified my resolve occurred a week later during a family dinner, when my mother said 6 words that made the entire situation undeniably clear. Those words confirmed where I stood in their eyes, and they gave me all the clarity I needed to move forward with my plan. Fast forward back to tonight, December 21st at 9:30 p.m. I was sitting on my couch, finishing a glass of wine, watching the notifications pile up on my phone. For the past 2 hours, my family had been frantically trying to reach me. The thick folder of financial evidence sat right there on the coffee table. Outside, Denver was bright with holiday lights, and inside, I finally opened the flurry of messages. Victoria's first text had come in at 7:53 p.m., just 6 minutes after my reply about my attorney. What do you mean, attorney? What attorney? Call me right now. The all caps and exclamation points were classic Victoria. The moment she felt a loss of control, the volume went up. My mother texted at 7:58 p.m. Hannah Marie Brooks, you call your sister back this instant. That is not how you talk to this family. Using my full name, just like when I was a kid and didn't fall in line. My father's message arrived at 8:12 p.m. The fact that he was texting at all showed how frantic they were. Richard Brooks almost never texts. Your mother is very upset. Whatever this is about, we can handle it like adults. Call the house. Then, at 8:34 p.m., Victoria sent another one. George, you are being completely unreasonable. We were eventually going to invite you anyway. Stop being so dramatic. I read that line 3 times. We were eventually going to invite you anyway. As if my presence at Christmas was an afterthought, a privilege extended only if I stayed compliant. I switched over to my voicemails. 4 missed messages. George. The first was from Victoria at 8:02 p.m., her voice sharp and agitated. Hannah, I don't know what game you think you're playing, but it isn't funny. You can't just threaten to cut off your support. We have arrangements. Call me back. The word arrangements stood out, not agreements, not voluntary help. Arrangements, as if my support was an automatic service she was entitled to. George. The second was from my mother at 8:15 p.m., full of practiced guilt. Hannah, your father and I are deeply hurt. After everything we've done for you, this is how you treat your family? Victoria is beside herself. She was so excited to host. Please don't ruin this for everyone. I played it twice, trying to recall a single instance of them prioritizing my needs over the years. Nothing came to mind. George. The third was Victoria again at 8:47 p.m. Her tone had shifted, softer, more calculated. Look, if my earlier text came off wrong, I'm sorry. I've just been under a lot of stress planning everything. Of course we want you there. Can we please just talk? A classic non-apology. Sorry if it came off wrong. Never, I'm sorry for what I did. George. The fourth was my father at 9:15 p.m., using his firm authority tone. Hannah, your mother has a migraine from all this stress. Whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it. Now be reasonable. Call us back, and let's get this sorted out before Christmas. Be reasonable. The exact phrase used my whole life whenever I was expected to yield. I set the phone down and closed my eyes. George. The voicemails were entirely predictable, just variations of the same dynamic I had experienced for 34 years. But one specific moment had drawn the line for good, making it impossible to ignore reality any longer. It happened on November 2nd, 7 weeks before Victoria sent that exclusion text. We were having dinner at my parents' house in Boulder. Everyone was there. George. My father sat at the head of the table, my mother directed the conversation, and Victoria and Marcus were there with the kids. I sat in my usual spot near the kitchen, stepping up to clear dishes or grab extra utensils whenever needed. The evening followed the standard script. Victoria held court, talking about her home improvements, her kids' school progress, and Marcus's recent promotion. George. My parents listened intently, nodding and asking follow-up questions. During a pause, I casually mentioned that I was looking into buying a condo. A brief silence settled over the table. My mother offered a flat, "That's nice, dear," before immediately turning back to Victoria to ask about her choice of kitchen tile. George. After dinner, I helped my mother clear the table while Victoria stayed in the living room, chatting with my father and Marcus. I scraped plates and loaded the dishwasher while laughter drifted in from the other room. My mother stood next to me, drying dishes. Victoria really is the heart of this family, she said quietly. I kept washing, my hands in the warm water. George. She's always been so special, my mother continued. You understand that, right, Hannah? You're solid and dependable, but Victoria, she just lights up a room. I paused for a second, waiting to see if she would add anything about me. Any small acknowledgement beyond being dependable. She just kept drying the dish, completely content with her assessment. George. Then she said those 6 words. We are so lucky to have her. Not we are so lucky to have both of you, just her. I didn't argue or make a scene. I finished drying the last dish, told my mother I had an early meeting the next morning, and gathered my things. George. I drove back to Denver in complete silence, no radio, no phone calls, just the dark highway ahead and the clarity of 34 years of history settling into place. When I arrived at my apartment, I sat in the car for 45 minutes. I didn't cry. George. I simply processed the realization that I had spent years trying to earn validation through effort while Victoria received it effortlessly, and that the pattern had been there all along. Growing up, Victoria was enrolled in dance, gymnastics, and summer camps, while my requests were met with explanations about limited budgets and Victoria needing an outlet. She got the larger bedroom overlooking the yard. I got the small one facing the neighbor's fence. When we were teenagers, Victoria got a full 16th birthday party with a DJ and dozens of guests. For my 16th, I received a family dinner and a card with a $20 bill. When Victoria stayed out past curfew at 17, it was treated as a minor phase. When I brought home a B+ in math, I received a lecture about not living up to my potential. When college came around, my parents covered Victoria's tuition and living expenses for 4 years at a state university. When it was my turn, they explained that funds were exhausted and that I would need to secure student loans. I worked 2 jobs while maintaining my GPA, while Victoria left school after 2 years to pursue other interests. No one ever mentioned the spent tuition again. When Victoria got married, my parents spent $40,000 on a resort wedding in Sedona. Years later, when I casually asked if they might contribute to my future plans, my mother laughed and said, "Let's focus on you finding the right person first, dear." When Victoria announced her first pregnancy, my mother hosted an elaborate shower with 50 guests. When I passed my CPA exam after years of hard work, I received a single text: "Congrats." The explanation was always the same. Victoria needs extra support. Victoria is going through a tough patch. You're strong, Hannah. You don't need us the same way. Being labeled strong wasn't a compliment. It was simply the excuse they used to overlook me. As I was sitting there reflecting on everything, my phone buzzed with an unusual notification. It wasn't a text or a call, but a security alert email from my bank. Security alerts, unusual login attempt. Someone was trying to log into my checking account online. The login attempt originated from Boulder, Colorado. The IP address didn't match any of my recognized devices. Status: failed. Incorrect password. My blood ran cold. I immediately logged into my mobile banking app to inspect the security log. Over the past hour, there had been 3 failed login attempts. 1 for checking, 1 for savings, and 1 for my investment account. All 3 came from the exact same IP address in Boulder. All 3 failed because I had updated every single password and security question just a week prior. I mapped out the timeline. Victoria's text cutting me off came through at 7:47 p.m. My response mentioning my attorney went out at 7:48 p.m. The first unauthorized login attempt occurred at 8:23 p.m. Exactly 35 minutes after I refused to keep playing the compliant daughter. They weren't just panicking over losing my financial backing. They were actually trying to log straight into my accounts and transfer my money out. Victoria's dramatic text hadn't just been cruel. It was a deliberate distraction. While they assumed I'd be crying, falling apart, and begging for forgiveness, someone was actively trying to drain my accounts behind the scenes. I dialed the bank's fraud prevention line on the spot, reported the unauthorized access attempts, and requested a complete security freeze on all my accounts. The representative confirmed that no funds had been moved and that every single attempt had been successfully blocked. I sat in my dark living room, holding the phone tightly. Outside, the neighborhood Christmas lights cast fragmented shadows across my wall. For 3 long months, I had been building a case file, gathering evidence, and waiting for the right moment. Victoria had just handed me that moment on a silver platter. I opened my laptop and drafted a concise email to Daniel Reyes. Subject: Phase 2. Ready to proceed. I briefed him on Victoria's text, my response, and the unauthorized access attempts on my bank accounts. I told him I was done waiting and wanted to move forward with every legal option we had discussed. His reply popped up at 11:02 p.m. I was just about to email you. I uncovered new information regarding that property transfer. The situation is far more complex than we initially thought. Come to my office tomorrow at 8 a.m. Bring everything. I stared at those words. Far more complex than we thought. Porch. I couldn't imagine what could possibly be worse than $84,000 in fraudulent debt racked up in my name, and a family that treated me like a walk-up ATM. But I was about to find out that Victoria's fraud wasn't even the main event. It was just the prelude. By 8:15 the next morning, I walked into the law firm to find Daniel already seated at his desk. Porch. The early morning sun sliced through the window blinds, casting sharp lines across the room. On his desk lay a thick folder I hadn't seen before, labeled Brooks Property, Balderkanky Records. He skipped the pleasantries entirely. Before we discuss our next steps, you need to see what turned up. He slid the folder toward me. I opened it, my hands noticeably steadier than I expected. Porch. Inside were printed public property records, mortgage filings, and what looked like a deed transfer agreement. Your parents' house, Daniel began. The one on Pinewood Drive that you've been helping pay for over the last 5 years. I nodded, feeling a familiar tightness in my stomach. 6 months ago, the title was transferred. Your parents no longer own that property. My head snapped up. Porch. What? Transferred to who? To Victoria Marie Brooks Callahan. For a moment, the words refused to assemble into a coherent sentence. I stared at the documents, looking at my sister's signature on a title transfer agreement, dated June 15th. The house I had been subsidizing, the property I had sent $1,400 a month for like clockwork, it now belonged entirely to Victoria. Porch. That doesn't make sense, I blurted out. If the title transferred, I would have seen a change in the mortgage payments. Daniel's voice was gentle but steady. The mortgage payments you sent your parents over the past 5 years, totaling $72,000, were never actually forwarded to the lender, Hannah. Your parents kept those funds. Porch. 6 months ago, Victoria refinanced the house in her name to clear the remaining balance. I sat frozen, processing the reality of what he was telling me. For 5 full years, I believed I was helping my parents keep a roof over their heads. Every month, I transferred $100 from my account to theirs. Money I could have used for my own down payment, my own future. And they lied. Porch. They took the money and used it for entirely different purposes. Here is what the records indicate, Daniel continued. Years ago, your parents defaulted on their original mortgage. Instead of telling you the truth, they let you believe your payments were securing the house while diverting those funds elsewhere. Porch. When Victoria engaged in identity fraud, part of that $47,000 loan went towards settling the back dues on the house. Then 6 months ago, she refinanced the property under her name, cleared the remaining debt, and took full ownership. He pointed to the paperwork. The June 15th deed transfer bore the signatures of Richard and Patricia Brooks. Porch. The new mortgage approved under Victoria's name was processed using my stolen credit profile as part of the underlying verification. The property was currently assessed at $680,000. So for 5 years, I thought I was preserving my parents' home? Yes, Daniel confirmed. And they misrepresented the situation to you the entire time. Porch. And now Victoria owns a property worth nearly $700,000, built on my money and my stolen identity? That is correct. I leaned back into the chair, letting the sheer weight of their deception wash over me. $84,000 in fraudulent debt. $72,000 in diverted mortgage payments. A whole property transferred right under my nose. Porch. And through it all, I had sat at their holiday dinners, smiling and playing with my nieces in the yard. What are my legal avenues? I asked, my voice entirely stripped of emotion. Daniel walked me through the options again, but the stakes had shifted dramatically. Porch. Filing formal criminal charges meant all 3 of them could face legal exposure, Victoria as the primary actor, and my parents as accessories after the fact. Pursuing civil litigation meant a lengthy court battle, a forced sale of the property, and years of legal friction. Porch. A hybrid approach would involve filing fraud affidavits with the credit bureaus to clear my name immediately, while reserving the right to pursue further legal remedies later. If I pursue criminal charges, I asked, What happens to my nieces? Daniel paused. Primary custody would likely fall to their father, Marcus. George. If he's unable to care for them, State Protective Services would have to step in. Lily and Emma, 7 and 5 years old. They were completely innocent in all of this. They didn't choose their mother, and they didn't ask to be born into a family built on a foundation of lies. I need time to think, I said. Can we start with the credit bureau fraud reports first? George. Clear my name, but hold off on full legal action for a moment? Daniel nodded slowly. We can do that, but Hannah, they haven't shown you any consideration. Maybe not, but those 2 little girls haven't done anything wrong. I drove home in a haze, the Denver streets glaringly bright in the midday sun. Porch. Everywhere I looked, Christmas was on display. Wreaths on doors, lights strung across porches, families carrying shopping bags down the sidewalk. I felt completely detached from it all, like I was watching the world through a thick sheet of glass. Back at my apartment, I sat on the couch and stared at the wall. Porch. The evidence folder sat open on the coffee table, with Daniel's new documents right on top, the deed transfer with my sister's name staring back at me. Memories came unbidden. Last Christmas, Lily running to the door to greet me, her face bright with excitement. Aunt Hannah, did you bring presents? I always did. Porch. I had picked out art supplies specifically for her because I knew how much she loved to draw. Emma's 5th birthday back in March. Quiet and shy, so much like I was at that age. Everyone else got her princess dresses and noisy plastic toys. I gave her an illustrated book about a little girl who dreamed of becoming an astronaut. She carried it everywhere for months. George. Victoria had rolled her eyes, saying she didn't get why Emma was so obsessed with that silly thing. Then Thanksgiving last year. While the adults were arguing over a football game in the other room, Lily had quietly whispered to me in the kitchen. Aunt Hannah, why doesn't Mommy like you? I had frozen with a dish towel in my hand. Sweetie, why would you say that? George. Because when you're not here, she talks differently about you, meaner. Even those little girls knew something was deeply wrong with this family. Kids feel it, even when the adults pretend everything is fine. And now, their future was tied up in whatever decision I made next. At 1 p.m., the doorbell rang. I had been sitting on the couch for over an hour without moving. George. The sound pulled me back to reality, and I forced myself up. Standing outside was Megan Chen, my closest friend and a coworker of 6 years. She took one look at my face and pushed her way inside. God, Hannah, what happened? I told her everything. The meeting with Daniel, the title transfer, Victoria taking ownership of the house I paid for. George. Daniel's documents were spread across my coffee table like evidence at a crime scene, which was exactly what they were. Megan listened without interrupting once. When I finished, she sat next to me on the couch and grabbed my hand. Okay, let me make sure I'm understanding this correctly. Your sister stole $84,000 in your name. Your parents enabled it. George. They lied to you for 5 years about mortgage payments. Victoria now owns a $700,000 house funded by your hard work. And you're sitting here feeling guilty because of her kids. I pulled my hand back gently. They're innocent, Megan. Lily and Emma didn't do any of this. Megan turned to face me directly. Hannah, look at me. They are using those kids as a shield. George. That isn't love, it's manipulation. Victoria committed major federal crimes, and now she's hiding behind her daughters to avoid the consequences. That guilt isn't yours to carry. It's hers. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. Another text from my mother. Victoria told me what you're accusing her of. I am appalled, Hannah. We are a family. How could you believe such lies about us? George. Immediately followed by another. Think about the children. Think about what you're doing to this family. You aren't the Hannah we raised. You've changed. And a third. I spoke with Pastor Williams. He agrees that forgiveness is the only path forward. Whatever grievances you think you have, we can resolve them as a family. Not through lawyers and threats. George. Megan stood behind me, reading the screen over my shoulder. She's bringing out the pastor now. Classic move. Notice how she isn't actually denying anything? She's just lecturing you on forgiveness and grievances. She knows, Hannah. She knew the whole time. I stared at the text messages. My mother was right about one thing. I had changed. I was no longer the Hannah who apologized for taking up space, nor the Hannah who quietly absorbed the fallout of everyone else's bad choices. They will never admit it, I said softly. Not to me, not to anyone. In their minds, they're the victims, and I'm just the ungrateful, troublemaking daughter. So what are you going to do? I don't know yet. But I am officially done feeling guilty for choices I didn't make. At 3:45 p.m., my phone rang. The caller ID made my entire body tense up. Dad. My father hadn't called me directly in nearly 3 years. Every bit of communication always went through my mother. Always. That's unusual, Megan noted. Your dad never calls you directly. Maybe you should answer, just to see what new line they're trying to push. I picked up. Dad? His voice wasn't what I expected. There was no anger, no lecturing, just a heavy, bone-deep exhaustion. Hannah, we need to speak in person. I don't think that's a good idea right now. Please, just hear me out. There are things you don't know. I know more than enough, Dad. A long pause hung on the line. When he spoke again, his voice was noticeably unsteady. No, not everything, not the things that actually matter. Tomorrow at noon, come by the house. Just give us a chance to explain. Your mother doesn't know I'm making this call. This is strictly between us. Father to daughter. I glanced at Megan. She shrugged, mouthing. Your call. Fine, I said. Tomorrow at noon. Thank you, Hannah. I don't deserve it, but thank you. I hung up and sat in the quiet apartment. Father to daughter. He hadn't used that phrase with me in my entire adult life. Do you think it's a trap? Megan asked. With this family? It's always a trap. But if there's genuinely something I don't know, something that changes the facts, I need to hear it out, even if it hurts. I didn't trust my father, and I certainly didn't trust anyone else in that house. But that tired, broken tone was something I had never heard from Richard Brooks before. For the first time in my life, he sounded like a man who had run out of exits. And that, more than anything, made me uneasy. The drive to Boulder felt significantly longer than usual. I took Highway 36 along the foothills, watching the snow-covered peaks ahead while trying to mentally prepare for whatever was coming. The evidence folder sat on the passenger seat, noticeably thicker than when I first went to my parents' house. Holiday music played on every radio station, so I turned the sound off entirely and drove in silence. At noon, I pulled onto Pinewood Drive. The entire street looked like a holiday postcard. Snow-dusted lawns, wreaths on front doors, and light displays waiting for nightfall. My parents' house sat at the end of the cul-de-sac. The property I had spent $72,000 trying to protect, the house that now legally belonged to my sister. There were 2 cars in the driveway. My parents' Buick and Victoria's white SUV. Parked along the curb was a silver BMW I didn't recognize. I parked along the street instead of pulling into the driveway, making sure I had an unobstructed exit route if things went sideways. Knowing the truth changed how the house looked to me. It no longer felt like a family home. It looked like a crime scene wrapped in festive decorations. I grabbed the folder, walked up to the front door, and rang the bell like a stranger. Victoria answered. She was dressed casually. Her eyes red and swollen from crying, or at least attempting to look like she had been. Past her shoulder, I could see the living room arranged like a formal intervention. My father sat on the main sofa, my mother right beside him. Victoria's husband, Marcus, stood near the window, looking visibly uncomfortable and tense. An expression I had never seen on him before. Christmas decorations filled every corner of the room. A fully dressed tree, garland over the fireplace, and a row of hanging stockings. I did a quick head count of the stockings, 4 in total. Richard, Patricia, Victoria, and Marcus. None bore the name Hannah. Hannah, my mother said, standing up from the sofa. Thank God you came. Please, sit down. I'll stand. Behind me, Victoria muttered under her breath. Of course you will. Victoria, that's enough. My father's voice cut across the room, sharper and firmer than I had ever heard it. The entire room fell quiet. I stood by the entryway, holding the evidence folder against my chest like a shield, waiting. Richard cleared his throat. Hannah, we asked you here because this family is fracturing. George, your mother and I spent the entire night talking about this. He looked at Patricia, who dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. We made missteps, and we recognize that now. My mother picked up the script, her voice filled with practiced emotion. We should have been transparent with you about the mortgage and the property status years ago. But you have to understand, we were backed into a corner. George, your father's business collapsed, and we were facing immediate foreclosure. Richard nodded slowly. When Victoria offered to assist with a refinance, it seemed like the only viable path forward. Patricia reached out a hand toward me, but I stayed right where I was. We didn't want our financial struggles to become your burden. You were already doing so much. George. I let their words hang in the air for a moment before speaking up. You didn't want to burden me? I sent you $400 every single month for 5 years, $72,000 in total. I believed those funds were going directly to the mortgage lender. Where did that money actually go? Dead silence filled the room. Where did my money go, Mom? Patricia looked over at Richard, who kept his eyes fixed on the floor. George. Victoria shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Finally, my father spoke. Bills, credit obligations. A portion was used to cover Victoria's immediate expenses. I laughed out loud, not out of amusement, but from the sheer absurdity of it. So I was funding Victoria's lifestyle while she was simultaneously using my identity to draw down unauthorized credit lines to fund it even further? George, that isn't a misstep. That's a coordinated financial scheme. Victoria snapped, jumping out of her chair. Here we go again, the martyr routine. You act like you've suffered so terribly. You have a lucrative career, a nice apartment, no children to worry about. Do you have any idea how hard it was for me to raise 2 kids when Marcus's business took a hit? George, do you even understand that kind of pressure? Marcus whipped around from the window, complete confusion written across his face. Wait a minute. What do you mean my business took a hit? Victoria froze instantly. My business didn't take a hit, Marcus continued, his voice rising. We had one slow quarter 2 years ago, but we recovered immediately. He turned his attention to me. George, what is she talking about? What identity fraud? I watched Victoria's face turn ghost white. She hadn't told him. Her own husband had been kept completely in the dark about her actions. He was living in a property acquired through fraudulent means without having any idea how it happened. I could have shielded her. I could have swallowed it all to keep the peace, just like I used to. George. But I didn't. I opened my folder. Marcus, I think you need to review these records. I handed him the loan agreements, credit reports, and the pages bearing my forged signature. He took them slowly, as if reluctant to see what was inside. The room fell dead silent, except for the sound of turning pages. As Marcus reviewed the documents, the color drained from his face with every page he turned. George. When he finished, he looked up at Victoria. What is this? Victoria's voice shook. Marcus, I can explain. A $47,000 loan taken out in her name? He held up the document. You told me the down payment came from an inheritance from your grandmother. Victoria didn't say a word. There was no inheritance, was there? Her silence was the answer. George. Marcus slammed the folder down onto the coffee table, his hands visibly shaking. And this property? Our house in Boulder. You told me my parents' contribution and our savings covered the entry costs. They did help, Victoria started. Mainly funded through debt drawn against your sister's credit profile? He turned to me. How much total? George. The core loan was $47,000, with $15,000 applied directly toward the down payment on that house. Marcus stared at the Christmas tree for a long moment, completely motionless. We're living in a home acquired through fraud. Victoria broke down in tears. Real, desperate tears this time. I intended to pay it back. I was going to clean it all up. Porch. When, Victoria? Marcus's voice sounded hauntingly hollow. When were you planning to tell me that our entire life was built on a lie? He stood up, looked around the room at every single one of us, and walked briskly toward the front door. I need air. I need to process this. He walked out without looking back. Porch. The front door closed softly behind him, but the quiet click sounded louder than a slam. Victoria collapsed back into her chair, burying her face in her hands. My mother immediately rushed to her side, wrapping her arms around her. Sweetheart, it's okay. We'll figure this out. Not a word to me. Not even a glance. Porch. Even with the facts fully exposed, Patricia's immediate instinct was still to comfort the daughter who had misappropriated my identity and money. I looked at them, seeing the toxic family dynamic laid out with complete clarity one last time. 5 years, I said quietly. $72,000. And not one of you thought I deserved the truth. My mother looked up, instantly defensive. Porch. We were trying to protect you. Protect me from what? Realizing my own family was taking advantage of me? It wasn't taking advantage, it was borrowing. Borrowing requires consent and repayment. I saw neither. My father spoke up then, his voice weak and defeated. Hannah, I am deeply sorry. I know that doesn't fix this, but I am sorry. Porch. Your mother and I got in over our heads, and instead of handling it responsibly, we took shortcuts. It was wrong, and I was wrong. Patricia glared at him. Richard, stop! Patricia, enough! We did this, and we have to face it. I gathered my files and stepped toward the door. Victoria looked up from her mother's shoulder. Hannah! Wait! I didn't stop. Porch. My mother's voice chased me down the hall. Look at what you've done. You've destroyed your sister's marriage. I paused at the threshold. No, Mom. Victoria destroyed her marriage the moment she forged my signature. I just handed Marcus the paper trail. I reached for the doorknob. Patricia's voice cut through the air once more. Hannah, wait! There's something else you need to know. Porch. I stopped, but didn't turn around. Victoria's house. It isn't just in her name. Your father co-signed the refinance agreement. If you take formal legal action against Victoria, you bring him down too. His retirement, his standing, everything. Is that what you want? To cause your own father's financial ruin? I turned around slowly to look at my mother, then shifted my gaze to my father. Porch. He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. My attorney will be in touch after the holidays, I said calmly. I pushed the door open and stepped out into the freezing December air. Snow was falling again, soft and silent. Behind me I could hear Victoria sobbing, my mother trying to soothe her and my father saying nothing at all. Porch. I got into my car and drove away. Away from the house I had spent years subsidizing. Away from the family dynamic I had tried so hard to sustain, and away from the silence that had kept their lies going for so long. They had turned my father into a human shield against accountability. If I pursued legal justice, I would have to drag him down along with Victoria. Porch. They calculated that my affection for him would force me to back off. 3 months ago, that calculation might have worked. But that was before I understood how deep the deception went. That was before I realized their care was entirely conditional, transactional, and ultimately a trap. I drove back toward Denver while snow hit the windshield. Porch. Only one thought kept repeating in my mind. No matter what happened next, I was no longer going to serve as the silent foundation holding this family up. It was time for them to see what happens when that support is completely removed. The drive back felt like moving through water, slow, heavy, and strangely surreal. Porch. The Rocky Mountains stretched out ahead, completely indifferent to the chaos in my life, while I held the steering wheel with white knuckles. My evidence folder sat on the passenger seat, noticeably thicker than when I first left for my parents' house. But the weight I felt had nothing to do with paper. Porch. My mother's words kept looping through my head. Your father co-signed the refinance agreement. If you take formal legal action against Victoria, you bring him down too. They had weaponized my father, turning him into a shield against legal accountability. Porch. The moment they set up that refinance, they built in an insurance policy. Richard Brooks, 64 years old, with his retirement and credit rating tied directly to Victoria's house. If I pursued legal remedies, I would pull him under as well. They counted on my care for him to keep me quiet. My phone rang through the car's Bluetooth connection. It was Daniel Reyes. Porch. I was just about to call you, I said. How did the meeting go? I let out a dry, humorless laugh. Exactly as expected. Or rather, worse. I brought him up to speed on everything. Marcus discovering the truth and walking out. Victoria's breakdown. My mother immediately rushing to comfort her, and the revelation about my father acting as a cosigner. Daniel listened quietly without cutting in. Porch. That complicates the landscape, he said once I finished. But it doesn't alter the core facts. It changes everything if I move forward, I countered. I'd be exposing my father to legal liability too. Your father made a choice, Hannah. He executed documents connected to a fraudulent process. He isn't an innocent bystander here, he's an active participant. He's still my father. Porch. That didn't stop Victoria, and she's still your sister. I had no response to that. He was right, and we both knew it. There's something else, Daniel continued. I located additional documentation regarding that refinance loan. When Victoria assumed the mortgage, there were irregularities in the filing. What kind of irregularities? The kind that can undo the entire transaction. Porch. But before I say more, I need to verify a few details. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning? First thing. Tomorrow is Christmas Eve. I know. But this can't wait. I told him I would be there at 8 a.m. and hung up. The snow was coming down harder now. I switched the wipers to a faster setting, watching them clear the glass mechanically. Porch. Whatever Daniel had uncovered that was urgent enough for a Christmas Eve meeting meant things were about to escalate even further. I got home around 3:30 p.m. My apartment felt strangely different. Smaller, quieter, stiller. I dropped the evidence folder on the kitchen counter and stood in the quiet, just breathing. Across the street, holiday lights cast colorful reflections through my window. Porch. Distant music drifted in from somewhere nearby. I thought about my father, Richard Brooks. The man who taught me how to ride a bike when I was 6, who stayed up late helping me with high school math, who cried at my college graduation. The only time I had ever seen him lose his composure. Porch. That was the father in my memory, the one I kept wanting to believe still existed under the surface, not the man who signed off on deceptive paperwork and let his wife orchestrate the misuse of my identity. When did he become this person? When did he decide that protecting Victoria's lifestyle was worth sacrificing my financial security? Porch. Or had he always been like this while I was simply too desperate for his approval to see it? At 5 p.m., my phone buzzed. Victoria. I almost didn't answer. But something made me hit accept. Maybe curiosity, maybe a need for finality, or maybe just sheer exhaustion. Hannah, please don't hang up. Her voice was completely wrecked, raspy from crying, every bit of her usual polish stripped away. Porch. I said nothing. I just waited. Marcus isn't answering my calls. He took Lily and Emma to his mother's house. They won't even let me speak to my own kids. This is the absolute worst day of my life. What do you actually want, Victoria? I want to fix this. I want to make it right. Tell me what I have to do. Tell me what you want. I want the last 10 years back. Can you give me that? Silence. Porch. Can you give me back my credit rating, my home down payment, my trust in my own family? Hannah, please. I want a sister who didn't view me as a resource to exploit from the start. Can you give me that? Another long silence. Then, in a barely audible whisper, she said something I never expected to hear. I was jealous of you. I stayed on the line, letting her continue. Porch. I was always jealous of you. You were smarter, more capable. You didn't need anyone. Mom and Dad gave me everything because I demanded it, but they respected you. I saw the way Dad looked at you when you got your CPA license. Like you were the child he was actually proud of. I just wanted to win for once. I absorbed her words. Porch. My sister. Who had received everything, constant praise. a $40,000 wedding, and a fully funded college education. Was jealous of me. The irony was almost too heavy to process. You didn't want to win, Victoria. You wanted me to lose. And you used Mom and Dad to make it happen. That isn't jealousy. That's cruelty. I didn't mean for it to go this far. That original loan was supposed to be temporary. Orch. I was going to pay it off before you ever found out. You opened 3 separate accounts over 2 years. That isn't temporary. That's systematic exploitation. I got in way deeper than I planned. Every time I thought I could clear it, something else came up. Marcus's business had a slow stretch. The girls needed things. The house needed repairs. Orch. So instead of asking for help, you just took what wasn't yours. Asking for help meant admitting I wasn't doing as well as you. Do you have any idea what it felt like living in your shadow? Perfect, Hannah, with the perfect job and the perfect credit. I couldn't let you see me fail. So you stole my identity and made me bear the cost of your failure? Orch. When my mortgage application was denied, you let me take the blame for your actions. Victoria started sobbing again. If you move forward legally, I lose everything. My house, maybe even my kids. Is that really what you want? To watch your nieces lose their mother? I need you to understand one thing, Victoria. The moment you forged my signature, you made a choice. Orch. Every single consequence that follows comes from that choice, not from me. I ended the call and placed the phone on the coffee table. I felt drained, completely hollowed out. Victoria's confession should have brought some sense of validation, but instead it just felt sad. Orch. My sister had spent her life competing for a prize I didn't even know existed, and in trying to win, she had dismantled everything around us. At 6:30 p.m., a text arrived from my father. Hannah, I need to tell you something. Your mother doesn't know I'm messaging you. A second text followed. I want you to know the truth. All of it. Orch. A third, regarding the property, it's far more complicated than Patricia explained. A fourth, I co-signed for a reason. It wasn't to protect Victoria, it was to protect you. A fifth, please let me explain. Without your mother there, just the 2 of us. Orch. I stared at those words. To protect you. Nothing about this situation had protected me. Every layer had been designed to extract resources from my life. But something about those words stayed with me. I replied, tomorrow, after I meet with my attorney, we can talk. His response came back instantly. Thank you, Hannah. I don't deserve it, but thank you. Orch. I made a simple dinner that night, though I had no real appetite, just a bowl of soup. My mind was spinning, processing everything that had happened and everything coming next. Tomorrow held 2 critical conversations. Daniel at 8 a.m., followed by my father. 2 opportunities to lay out the facts once and for all. Around 8 p.m., Megan texted, any updates from the family circus? Orch. I briefed her on Victoria's call, her confession about jealousy, and her bringing up the kids again. Standard guilt trip, Megan replied. What about your parents? My dad claims there's more to the story. He says he was trying to protect me. Protect you? That's a new angle. I don't buy it, but hear him out. Want me to come with you tomorrow? No. This is something I have to face on my own. Orch. Before going to bed, I opened my laptop. Ever since Daniel mentioned irregularities in the refinance, I hadn't been able to let it go. I accessed the Boulder County Public Property Database, typed in the Pinewood Drive address, and waited for the records to load. The property file pulled up. Owner of record, Victoria M. Callahan. I scrolled down to the mortgage and lien details. Orch. Lender, First Mountain Bank. Original date, June 15. Then my eyes caught something that made my chest tighten. Listed under additional secured parties was a secondary encumbrance, lien holder, Internal Revenue Service, IRS. Amount, $89,000. Status, active. An active $89,000 tax lien attached to the property. Orch. According to the filing date, that tax liability had been attached before Victoria ever took full title to the house. Which meant one thing. Someone else's severe tax debt had been anchored directly to the property. I sat in the dark apartment, the glow of the screen reflecting on my face, as the full picture came into sharp, cold focus. Orch. My parents hadn't transferred the title just to escape their mortgage default. They transferred the property to shield it from federal tax collection. And Victoria had unknowingly taken title to a property carrying massive tax liabilities. My sister wasn't just an offender in this situation. She was also compromised by the very people who had enabled her. Orch. And the individuals who put her in that position were the exact same people who had compromised me. Our parents. I barely slept that night. The discovery of the tax lien kept looping in my head, and I spent half the night researching tax encumbrances and title transfer law. Orch. By the time my alarm went off at 6:30 a.m. on December 24th, I had a much clearer understanding of what my parents had set in motion. But I needed Daniel to confirm the legal mechanics. Christmas Eve morning in Denver was quiet. A fresh layer of snow had fallen overnight, making the city look unrealistically peaceful. Orch. I brewed coffee, printed out the public record filings I had uncovered, and added them to my case file. The stack of paper was nearly 2 inches thick now, a paper trail capable of dismantling an entire family dynamic. At 8:15 a.m., I walked into Daniel's office. He was already at his desk with a cup of coffee, documents spread out across the workspace. Orch. The look on his face, the moment I walked in, told me everything I needed to know. Whatever he had uncovered was substantial. Before we get into next steps, I need you to see what turned up last night. I laid the printed filings on his desk. The tax encumbrance on the property. $89,000. Daniel nodded, his expression completely serious. I saw it. I pulled the same records. Orch. But there's a broader timeline here. He motioned for me to take a seat, opening a separate file. Let's start from the beginning. Your parents' property. The original mortgage was issued in 2008 for $320,000. By 2019, they had paid the balance down to around $210,000. That's when the financial position shifted. I folded my hands in my lap and waited quietly. Orch. Your father's business failed in 2018, leaving significant tax liabilities. Rather than setting up a structured resolution with the IRS, he deferred addressing it. Consequently, a federal tax lien was placed against the real estate in 2020 for $89,000. Orch. Your parents kept it quiet, out of pride, and because you were already making monthly contributions under the assumption that those funds were going directly to the mortgage. I closed my eyes, letting the reality sink in. So the money I was sending never actually went to the primary lender. Correct. Orch. It was diverted to cover living expenses, personal credit obligations, and supplement Victoria's finances. The mortgage fell into arrears while they continued accepting your payments, maintaining the appearance that everything was current. And the transfer to Victoria? Daniel leaned forward. When Victoria offered to handle a refinance, your parents saw an avenue out. Orch. They transferred title to her, assuming the transaction would clear the existing tax encumbrance. He paused. It doesn't work that way. Federal tax liens attach to the property itself and survive title transfers. Victoria took on a property backed by nearly $300,000 in combined liabilities. The new primary mortgage she took out, plus the underlying tax debt she unknowingly assumed. Orch. She didn't know about the tax lien? I asked. Daniel shook his head. Based on these filings, it's unlikely. Your parents transferred a heavily encumbered asset to her under the guise of an opportunity. I sat with that realization. Victoria had committed outright identity fraud against me, exploiting my credit profile to build a lifestyle she couldn't afford. Orch. But she had also been used by our parents, handed a home anchored to an $89,000 tax liability. There's another issue, Daniel continued, pulling out an additional page. This is the original 2008 mortgage contract. It includes a standard acceleration clause, the due on sale provision. I had come across the term during my late-night research, but I wanted his legal breakdown. Orch. When your parents transferred the deed to Victoria, it triggered that provision. The The contract mandates that the primary lender be notified of any ownership transfer. If unnotified, the lender holds the right to demand immediate repayment of the outstanding balance. Did they notify the bank? No, they concealed the transfer. The lender is completely unaware that Victoria holds the deed. Payments are still drawn from your parents' account, backfilled by the proceeds from Victoria's refinance. It's a paper shell game. If the primary lender discovers the unauthorized transfer, they can declare the entire loan in default, demanding immediate payment on the $215,000 balance. Combined with the $89,000 tax lien, the total liability exceeds $300,000. I ran the numbers in my head. Who can notify the bank about the transfer? Daniel paused. Anyone with a documented financial interest in the property, including you, given that you were submitting monthly payments under the pretense of paying down that specific mortgage. You have legal standing. So if I notify First Mountain Bank of the unauthorized transfer, I said slowly, the lender will likely initiate foreclosure proceedings. Victoria loses the property. And my parents? They remain liable for any remaining deficiency balance. Meanwhile, the IRS will continue pursuing the tax debt against any accessible assets. It dismantles everyone's financial position completely. Yes. Victoria loses the house. Your parents' retirement assets become vulnerable, and given the fraudulent elements involved in the initial transfer, there could be significant legal exposure. I stared at the document spread across Daniel's desk. 3 months ago, I discovered my sister had taken $84,000 in my name. Now I held documentation of a far more complex scheme. Tax evasion, mortgage fraud, and a breach of loan terms. It gave me leverage that could completely upend their lives. I don't want to destroy them, I said finally. I just want my financial independence back and what was taken from me. Daniel nodded steadily. Then we use this as leverage, not a weapon. We draft a formal notice outlining the documentation in our possession and the legal remedies available to you. Give them a clear set of terms to resolve this before any formal reporting takes place. He opened his laptop. What are your specific demands, Hannah, I thought it over carefully. I want the $84,000 in fraudulent debt completely removed from my name and cleared. I want reimbursement for the $72,000 in diverted mortgage payments. I want a written acknowledgement of their actions. And I want a complete break from any shared financial ties moving forward. Daniel typed rapidly. We will make it clear, precise, and legally binding. Over the next hour, the document came together. Clause by clause, Daniel detailed the full record, the unauthorized accounts opened in my name with specific dates and amounts, the diverted mortgage payments, the breach of the mortgage transfer terms, the attached IRS lien, and the true chain of responsibility. Then came the terms, immediate steps to clear my credit profile, a structured plan to reimburse the $72,000, signed affidavits of the unauthorized actions, and a formal agreement to cease all financial contact. Deadline: December 31st. Failure to comply meant I would notify First Mountain Bank of the unauthorized title transfer, file formal fraud affidavits with law enforcement, and initiate civil litigation to recover all damages. Daniel printed 3 copies. One for Victoria, one for my parents, and one for my records. How do you want this delivered? He asked. Certified mail takes a few days. I'll deliver them in person today. He raised an eyebrow. On Christmas Eve? They wanted a family holiday. They get total clarity instead. I gathered the files and stood up. He walked me to the off doors. After I drop these off, I'm meeting my father separately, I noted. He claimed he has details to explain, that he was trying to protect me. Are you sure that's a wise step? He says there's more to the story. I need to know if there's anything genuine left to account for. If not, at least I know where things stand without any lingering doubts. I drove toward Boulder with the case file resting on the passenger seat. Holiday music streamed from every radio station, but I let the melodies play in the background, keeping my eyes on the road ahead. Porch. As I passed near Broomfield, my phone buzzed through the Bluetooth system. Victoria, I picked up. Hannah, don't come over here. I'm already on the way. Things are falling apart. Her voice sounded entirely different. No anger, no demands, just sheer panic. Marcus called. He went through my files and found the IRS documents. Porch. He's talking about hiring a lawyer, filing for fraud, taking primary custody of the girls. Hannah, please, whatever you're planning, I'm going to lose everything. I pulled over at a rest stop along the highway. Victoria, I wasn't the one who placed those liabilities on you. What? That $89,000 IRS tax lien. That belongs to Mom and Dad. Now it's anchored to your property. Porch. You didn't just take over the house. You assumed their tax debt. Dead silence hung on the line. Then, barely above a whisper, she asked, What? The $89,000 lien was attached to the property back in 2020, long before you took title. Federal tax liens stay with the real estate regardless of who holds the deed. When Mom and Dad signed the house over to you, that debt came with it. Porch. Another heavy silence followed. They told me the title was clear. They swore it was fine. They misrepresented the facts to both of us. The only difference is that I caught it first. A strange sound came over the line, halfway between a bitter laugh and a sob. Victoria, I'm coming over to hand-deliver a legal notice drafted by my attorney. It outlines the full paper trail and my terms. Porch. You have until December 31st to respond. But before you make any decisions, you should know that Dad asked to meet me privately. He claims there are details I don't know. It's his one chance to be transparent. Hannah, wait. I disconnected the call. I sat in the parking lot for a moment, the engine idling while snow dusted the windshield. Porch. In a couple of hours, I would stand face to face with my father, holding the documentation of his silence. I would find out if a single thing he had ever told me held any truth. But first, I had a notice to deliver. Merry Christmas, Victoria. By 2:00 p.m., I turned onto Pinewood Drive. Porch. The neighborhood looked completely peaceful. Snow-covered lawns, decorative wreaths, holiday lights waiting for dusk. Victoria's white SUV stood alone in the driveway. My parents' Buick was nowhere to be seen. Knowing the full picture stripped away any illusion. It wasn't a family home, but a property burdened by $300,000 in underlying liabilities. Porch. And my sister was inside, realizing the lifestyle she had taken on was built on sand. I parked along the curb, grabbed the envelope from the seat, and walked up the front path. Daniel's letter sat right on top, bearing his firm's formal letterhead. I rang the doorbell. After a long delay, Victoria opened the door. Porch. She looked worse than she sounded on the phone. No makeup, unwashed hair, eyes swollen from crying. On Christmas Eve afternoon, she was still in her pajamas. Behind her, the house was in disarray, toys scattered across the floor, unwashed dishes in the sink, the tree lights left unlit. Hannah, I didn't think you'd actually show up. I told you I would. I held out the document. Porch. This is from my attorney. Her hands shook as she took it. What is this? The complete paper trail, the unauthorized accounts, the diverted mortgage funds, the IRS tax lien, and the legal remedies I will pursue if we don't reach a settlement. Hannah, please, can we just talk? Without lawyers, without. We are way past casual conversations. Read the letter, Victoria. Porch. You have until December 31st. Her face crumpled. The girls aren't here. Marcus took them to his mother's house. He said he's filing for divorce and seeking full custody. I might lose my kids, Hannah. Does that mean anything to you at all? It means a great deal. Which is why I'm giving you a formal opportunity to resolve the financial liabilities before formal proceedings start. Porch. Read the terms, then we can discuss the next steps. She clutched the envelope against her chest, as if holding off the reality inside it. Where are you meeting, Dad? He asked to speak with me privately. A subtle shift crossed Victoria's expression, fear, confusion, and something I couldn't quite identify. Hannah, wait. Whatever he tells you, the situation is more layered than you think. Porch. Dad wasn't the only one keeping secrets. I looked at her face, searching for the familiar signs of manipulation. but all I saw was sheer exhaustion and genuine distress. I left her standing in the doorway and drove toward downtown Boulder. The coffee shop, Mountain Brew on Pearl Street, was nearly empty on Christmas Eve afternoon. Porch. My father was sitting in a corner booth, staring into an untouched cup of coffee. He looked 10 years older than he had 2 days ago. Gray stubble covering his jaw, his clothes wrinkled as if he had slept in them, his eyes struggling to focus. I slid into the booth across from him. I didn't order anything. I simply set my evidence folder on the table between us like a boundary. Porch. Thank you for coming, he said, his voice raspy. I wasn't sure you'd show up. You said you had something to explain. About protecting me. He nodded slowly. Yes. But before I start, I need you to understand one thing. Every decision I made, every mistake, every silence, I convinced myself I was doing what was necessary. Necessary for whom? He met my eyes for the first time. Porch. For you, Hannah, it was always about trying to cushion the blow for you. I didn't take the bait, but I let him speak. When my business failed in 2018, your mother blamed me entirely. She wanted to approach you directly for a lump sum, $50,000 to clear our debt and start over. I remained silent, listening. I refused. Porch. You had already contributed so much over the years, and asking for a handout felt wrong. That's when she came up with the mortgage arrangement, letting you believe your payments were securing the house while redirecting those funds to cover basic expenses. I should have put my foot down, but I didn't. And the identity fraud? Richard's face contorted in visible shame. Porch. When Victoria needed capital for her house, Patricia saw an opportunity. She encouraged Victoria to use your credit details, telling her you'd never notice. Victoria hesitated at first. She knew it was wrong, but your mother has a way of making terrible choices sound completely justifiable. So you're putting the entire responsibility on Mom? Porch. I'm telling you that your mother orchestrated the strategy. Victoria executed it, and I stood by and let it happen. He took a shaky breath. But I tried to draw a line where I could. How? When they arranged the title transfer to Victoria, Patricia wanted to list you as a co-signer on the new refinance loan, linking your name directly to the property's underlying liabilities. I refused. Porch. I told her if she put your name on that contract, I would expose the entire arrangement to you on the spot. That's why I signed as the co-signer instead, to keep your name off the refinance papers. I knew it put my own retirement at risk if things collapsed, but it kept you clear of that specific debt. I stared at him, processing the sheer absurdity of it. That's what you call protecting me? Porch. Taking on debt you couldn't afford while quietly standing by as they stole my identity? It was the one line I managed to hold, Hannah, and I held it. I sat with that statement. My father, the man I had looked up to my whole life, had reduced his idea of protection to drawing a line in the sand while watching his wife and older daughter systematically exploit my financial profile. Porch. It was tragic, but it felt like the raw truth. So Mom orchestrated it. Victoria went along with it. And what were you, an active bystander? I was a coward. A coward who prioritized keeping peace with my wife over doing what was right by my daughter. He looked down at his cold coffee. For 40 years, I let Patricia dictate the terms of this family, making excuses, looking the other way. Porch. By the time I realized how severe the damage was, I was too deeply entrenched to pull back. And the favoritism? Victoria always being the priority? Richard sighed quietly. That was Patricia too. Victoria reminded her of herself, needing constant attention, validation, and center stage. You were like me, quiet, capable, self-sufficient. Porch. Your mother didn't know how to interact with someone who didn't depend on her, so she assumed you didn't need anything from us at all, and she taught Victoria to see you the exact same way. I felt a subtle shift inside me. Not forgiveness, nowhere near it, but a strange sense of clarity. Porch. My mother had shaped the family dynamic like clay, fitting each of us into rigid roles. Victoria as the star, me as the reliable resource, Richard as the enabler. None of us had been strong enough to break the pattern. I should have protected you, Hannah, Richard's voice cracked. Real protection. Not just keeping your name off a refinance contract, but standing up to your mother on your behalf. George. For 34 years, I failed to step up. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed you to know the actual sequence of events, even the parts that expose how weak I was. I looked across the table at my father, the man who taught me to ride a bike, who cried at my graduation, and who ultimately let his wife treat me like a financial resource, while he watched from the sidelines. George, are you expecting me to say it's fine, that understanding your motives makes it okay? No, I just want you to know that I see what I allowed to happen, what we all did. Acknowledging it doesn't undo the damage, I know, and it doesn't change what comes next. The notice I gave Victoria. The terms are non-negotiable. I understand. Can you meet those terms? George. Reimbursing the funds, signing the written acknowledgments, clearing the debt? I don't know. Patricia handles the accounts. She always has. But I will do everything in my power to make it happen, whatever it takes. Then do it, because December 31st isn't a suggestion. It's a hard deadline. He nodded, tears welling in his eyes. I haven't forgiven you, Dad. I don't know if I ever will. George. But I'm glad you finally laid out the truth. That's a start. It's more than I deserve. I gathered my folder and stood up. Before I could take a step, my phone rang. It was Victoria, I answered. Hannah, it's Mom. What happened? She found out Dad met with you privately. She saw the legal notice. She started yelling, saying Dad betrayed her, that you were destroying the family. George. And then she collapsed. She's completely unresponsive. We called 911. The ambulance is taking her to Boulder Medical Center right now. My heart dropped. Is she breathing? Yes, but it's shallow. They think it's a heart attack or a stroke. I don't know. Hannah, please, whatever you think of us, she's still our mother. Please come. I looked at my father. George. The color had drained from his face. He had heard every word through the receiver. I'm on my way. I drove to the hospital, completely uncertain whether my mother was stable or not, unsure of how to feel, and hating the guilt that came with that uncertainty. But one thing was absolute. No matter what happened next, the old dynamic was gone for good. The Brooks family was completely broken. George, I wasn't sure if any of us had enough pieces left to put anything back together. Boulder Medical Center sat on the edge of town, its windows glowing against the darkening Christmas Eve sky. At 5:15 p.m., I pushed through the automatic sliding doors, met instantly by the sterile smell of antiseptic and underlying tension. George. The lobby was decorated for the holidays. A small artificial tree stood near the reception desk, tinsel flickering under the fluorescent lights. The festive look felt completely out of place. I located the information desk. Patricia Brooks. She was brought in by ambulance. The nurse checked her screen. Room 412, 4th floor. Family is already upstairs. George. I took the elevator up alone, watching the digital floor numbers light up. 2, 3, 4. The doors opened to a quiet hallway. Victoria was waiting near the elevator bank, her face stained with tears. She's stable. Victoria blurted out before I could ask. It wasn't a heart attack. The doctor said it was a severe panic attack that triggered a stress-induced arrhythmia. George. They're keeping her overnight for observation. Where's Dad? In the room with her. She won't let him leave. Victoria led me to a small waiting nook equipped with uncomfortable vinyl chairs and a muted television playing a holiday movie. We sat on opposite sides of the room, the distance between us feeling both necessary and surreal. I read the notice. Victoria said after a long silence. George. All of it. The IRS lien, the mortgage default clause, everything. I said nothing, letting her continue. Mom and Dad dumped their tax liabilities on me. They swore the property title was completely clear, making me feel like I was saving the family by taking over the mortgage. I was so desperate to finally be the responsible one. The daughter who saved the day. George. And the whole time they were setting me up to carry their debt. Her voice cracked. I wasn't the only one they exploited, was I? No, you weren't. The tension between us shifted slightly, Not into forgiveness or even full understanding, but into mutual recognition. 2 daughters, both used as tools in our mother's elaborate family narrative. Porch. My father appeared in the doorway of the waiting room, looking entirely drained. His eyes were bloodshot and his hands shook slightly. "She's awake," he said. "The doctor said she can have visitors, but she's weak. They want to keep her stress levels down." He looked directly at me. "She asked to see you." Victoria's tone sharpened instantly. "What about me?" Richard's brief pause said it all. "Porch. She asked for Hannah first." Victoria let out a bitter, quiet laugh. Of course she did. Even now, lying in a hospital bed, she's still playing favorites, just shifting the roles around. She stood up abruptly. "I need air. I'll be outside." She walked off without another word to either of us. Richard reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. "Porch. Hannah, before you go in, I need to give you this. I've been carrying it since yesterday, waiting for a moment to hand it over. It seems there's never going to be a right time, so take it now." I took the envelope, but didn't open it immediately. "It's a start," he said. "It doesn't make up for everything, but it's a concrete step." Porch. Victoria signed a document this morning before all of this happened. She's transferring the property title back to your mother and me. We are putting the house on the market to liquidate the equity and pay down the liabilities. Why did Victoria agree to that? Because Marcus is leaving her, and she can't cover the mortgage payments without his income. Porch. And because I told her it was the only way to satisfy your legal terms without law enforcement getting involved. I opened the envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $50,000, a copy of the executed property deed transfer, and a note written in my father's shaky handwriting. Porch. Hannah, this represents the immediate liquid funds your mother and I can access, our remaining savings, and a loan drawn against my retirement account. It doesn't cover the full balance, I know. But it's an initial payment. The remaining $72,000 from the diverted mortgage funds, along with Victoria's fraudulent accounts, will be cleared systematically. Porch. I will make monthly payments until the entire balance is settled, regardless of how long it takes. You deserved honesty, trust, and a genuine family structure, things I cannot retroactively grant you. But I give you my word that I will spend my remaining time fixing this financial damage. Your father. I stared at the cashier's check. Porch. $50,000, nearly 2/3 of the direct financial losses I had suffered, more than I expected them to gather immediately, though still short of full restitution. This doesn't fix the underlying history, I said quietly. I know. But it is an initial step if you're willing to accept it as one. I placed the envelope into my bag and walked toward room 412. Porch. The hospital room was small and dimly lit. Heart monitors beeped rhythmically in the background. Outside the window, the evening sky had turned dark, snow still falling against the glow of streetlights. Patricia sat propped up in the hospital bed, looking far smaller than I had ever remembered her. The formidable matriarch was now surrounded by IV lines and monitoring equipment. Porch. The gray roots of her hair were showing, a small detail that made me realize she had spent her life trying to maintain a carefully constructed appearance. Her eyes were closed as I stepped inside, but opened the moment she heard my footsteps. Hannah, you came. Her voice sounded thin and raspy. I stopped at the foot of the bed. Victoria called. Porch. After everything that happened, I wasn't sure if I should come. I almost assumed you wouldn't. A heavy silence filled the room, carrying the weight of 34 years of unsaid truths. The doctor says I need to keep my stress down. She attempted a faint smile. A parent, my heart can't keep up with the consequences of my choices. I didn't smile back. Is that supposed to be funny? Her face fell. Porch. No, I suppose it isn't. She closed her eyes briefly, gathering her strength. Richard told me about your meeting, about what he said, that I orchestrated the mortgage diversions and encouraged Victoria's use of your credit details. Was he telling the truth? Yes. The admission hung in the air. Porch. I braced myself for the usual excuses, rationalizations, or guilt trips I had grown accustomed to over the years. Instead, she said something entirely different. I spent my life trying to manage every outcome and control every person around me. When your father's business collapsed, I panicked. We were facing total loss. And you had everything I couldn't maintain. Stability, spotless credit, independence. I convinced myself I was just borrowing your strength because you were equipped to handle it. I told myself you'd never find out, and that even if you did, you'd forgive us. Because that's who you were, Hannah. You smoothed things over, absorbed the hit, and kept the peace. I stood unmoving at the foot of the bed. But this time you didn't smooth it over. You held the line. When I saw that legal notice and realized the full extent of what you could expose, my chest caved in. I thought I was dying. Maybe part of me wanted to, because the alternative was facing what I had done and the person I had become. Her voice broke completely. A mother who took from her own daughter. A mother who enabled her other child to do the exact same thing. What kind of parent does that? A parent who views her children as resources rather than people. Patricia winced as if she had been struck. Yes, that is precisely what I did. Tears tracked down her face. Not practiced, theatrical tears, but genuine distress from a woman facing the destruction she had caused. I am sorry, Hannah. For the harsh text, for enabling Victoria's behavior, for all of it. I'm sorry for raising you to feel less valuable than your sister. I am sorry for taking your money, your trust, and your security. I am sorry for becoming the kind of mother you had to protect yourself against. I listened quietly, making no move to comfort her or offer easy reassurance. Do you know what the worst part was, Mom? She waited, her breath hitched. It wasn't just the money or the identity theft. It was that you made me spend decades wondering what was wrong with me, why I couldn't earn the same care and respect you gave Victoria. And now I realize there was nothing wrong with me. The defect was in the dynamic you created. A muffled sob escaped her throat. I know. I see that now. I don't ask for your forgiveness. I haven't earned it. But I need you to know that you were never lesser than Victoria. You were capable, resilient, and strong. I was simply too compromised to value it properly. I stood in the silence that followed, processing the moment. Here it was, the full acknowledgement, the formal apology, the unvarnished truth. Yet it didn't bring a wave of triumph or grand satisfaction, just a quiet, heavy sense of resolution. I don't know if I can offer forgiveness, I said clearly, to any of you, but I am willing to watch your actions moving forward. Dad handed me a $50,000 check, and Victoria agreed to deed the property back to resolve the underlying debts. If you follow through on clearing the remaining liabilities, restoring my credit, and taking full financial accountability, then perhaps we can determine what kind of distant contact is possible later on. But I am making no promises today, and I am not pretending this history didn't happen. Patricia gave a weak, decisive nod. That is far more than I have any right to ask. Yes, it is. I turned toward the exit. As my hand touched the door handle, I paused for a brief second. I didn't wait for a response. Out in the corridor, Victoria was waiting. Not outside the building as she had claimed, but standing near the hallway windows. Her expression had hardened into something steady and resolute. I heard most of that through the open door, she noted. And, I think it's time we stop letting Mom use us as opposing forces against each other. I have a proposal that might help both of us move forward cleanly. Can we talk? Really talk? Not as adversaries, but as two sisters who were caught in the exact same toxic loop. I looked at her, really looked at her. Her bare face, the deep exhaustion around her eyes, and a rare, unvarnished sincerity. Tomorrow morning, Christmas Day. Come to my apartment at 10 a.m. Just you, no Mom, no Dad, no attorneys. Just the two of us. I'll be there. I walked toward the elevators, the envelope resting securely in my bag. I had entered the hospital expecting a final, bitter break. Instead, I left with a practical foundation for accountability. Perhaps, for the first time in our lives, My sister and I were finally standing on the exact same page. Christmas morning arrived quietly. I woke up at 7:30 a.m. without an alarm. The first holiday in years where I wasn't rushing to manage someone else's expectations. Outside my window, Denver was completely still, wrapped in a fresh blanket of white snow that sparkled in the crisp morning light. Porch. I brewed coffee slowly, taking in the quiet space. No demands, no obligation, no roles to perform. Just me, the snow, and the quiet comfort of my own home. For the first time in 34 years, spending Christmas alone felt like true freedom rather than an exclusion. The $50,000 check sat on my kitchen counter, a concrete start toward full restitution. Porch. As the coffee dripped, I looked at it, understanding what it represented, not instant reconciliation or a movie-style happy ending, but the very first step on a long, necessary boundary line. 4 days ago, I had received a text intended to cut me out and make me feel worthless. "We are not doing Christmas with you this year. We don't need you." Porch. Instead of breaking down, I had systematically dismantled the deception that held my family together. And now, on Christmas morning, I sat in my apartment, not abandoned, not defeated, but completely independent. For the very first time in my life, I knew what true autonomy felt like. Victoria was scheduled to arrive at 10 a.m. Porch. I took a shower, dressed comfortably, and prepared coffee and pastries in the kitchen. No elaborate staging, no performance. Just an honest space for a real conversation. As I pulled back the curtains to let the morning sun fill the room, a thought struck me. In the 10 years I had lived on my own, my sister had never once visited my apartment. Porch. My family had never taken the time to step inside the life I built for myself. They had never seen the home I created through my own hard work, discipline, and independence. This was my space, built with my resources, my choices, and my strength. Nobody handed it to me, and nobody could ever take it away. Porch. At 10:05 a.m., there was a knock at the door. Soft, hesitant, completely unlike Victoria's usual confident, rapid cadence. I opened it to find my sister standing in the hallway, holding a small wrapped package. She looked different. No makeup, her hair pulled back into a simple ponytail, dressed in jeans and a sweater, instead of her usual polished attire. Porch. The glamorous older sister finally looked like a real person. "Merry Christmas, Hannah. Merry Christmas. Come on in." Victoria stepped inside, looking around. "This is nice. Very cozy. It's mine. That's what matters." She nodded slowly. "Yeah, I'm starting to understand what that means." She handed me the small package. "I brought you something. It's nothing expensive." Porch. I unwrapped it carefully to reveal a framed photo. It was Hannah and Victoria, maybe ages 6 and 10, standing in front of a Christmas tree with our arms around each other, smiling genuinely. It was taken before things got complicated, long before we were turned into rivals. "I found it in Mom's old album," Victoria said. "From before everything, before she started playing us against each other." Porch. I wanted you to remember that we weren't always like this. There was a time when I genuinely loved being your sister. I stared at the photo, a lump forming in my throat. 2 little girls who had no idea what was waiting for them down the road. "I remember this day," I said quietly. "You helped me decorate the tree. I couldn't reach the higher branches, so you lifted me up." Porch. I had completely forgotten about that moment. We sat on the couch with coffee between us and the photo propped against the table like a bridge between past and present. I spent all night thinking about what I wanted to say. Victoria began. "About what I could offer you beyond money or an apology. I can't undo what I did. The fraud, the lies, any of it." Porch. "But I can stop being a weapon Mom uses against you. I can start being your sister again, if you'll let me." I listened silently, letting her speak. "Marcus is moving forward with a divorce. Until custody is sorted out, he's keeping the girls at his mother's house. The property is being transferred back to Mom and Dad so they can sell it and clear the debt. I'm going to lose everything I built, or thought I built, but maybe that isn't the worst outcome. Maybe I need a fresh start. Maybe we both do. What would that even look like? Being sisters again? I don't know. Maybe getting to know who you actually are, rather than who Mom told me you were. Accepting that you're not my competitor, you're my family. Arch. Being the person you can call when you're in trouble, instead of the person who makes it worse. I know I haven't earned that yet, but I want to try, if you're willing. I set my coffee cup down and looked at her directly. I don't trust you, not yet. I know. And I don't know if I can offer forgiveness. That might take years. Or it might never happen. I understand. Arch. But I'm willing to see who you become without Mom directing the narrative behind the scenes. That's the only commitment I can offer right now. Tears filled Victoria's eyes. That's more than I have any right to ask for. Yes, it is. But I'm done only giving people what they deserve. I want to give myself a chance at having a real sister. Victoria's phone buzzed. Arch. She glanced at it, her expression instantly softening. It's Lily. She's asking if we can do a quick video call. I'm going to take this. She walked toward the window, her voice gentle as she spoke to her daughter. Merry Christmas, sweetie. I miss you so much. Yes, Mommy's fine. I'm here with Aunt Hannah. She smiled through her tears. She wants to talk to you. I took the phone. George. Merry Christmas, Lily. Merry Christmas, Aunt Hannah. Mommy said once things get sorted out, maybe we can all get dinner together. Can we? I glanced at Victoria. Maybe. We'll see. I got a telescope for Christmas. Dad said we can look at the stars tonight. That sounds wonderful, sweetie. I love you, Aunt Hannah. Those words hit harder than I anticipated. I love you too, Lily. George. Victoria took the phone back, wiping her eyes. They are the only truly good thing I've ever done. Then fight for them. Be the mother they deserve, not the kind Mom modeled for you. Victoria left around noon. We didn't hug. We weren't there yet, but the handshake was warm. Thank you for letting me come over. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the photo. Orch. Thank you for remembering who we used to be. I'll see you around, Hannah, whenever you're ready. Whenever I'm ready. After she left, I sat on the couch and picked up the photo. The two little girls in front of the Christmas tree. Before the favoritism, before the manipulation, before the money, the lies, and the betrayal. We didn't have to be enemies. Mom had turned us into adversaries. Orch. But she didn't get to dictate who we were anymore. I stood by the window, looking out over the snow-covered city. The holiday lights were still blinking on the buildings below, where families were walking, and kids were showing off new toys. I wasn't part of that picture. At least not today. But I wasn't missing out on anything either. Victoria's original text was meant to exclude me, to punish me. Orch. Instead, it set me free. It freed me from the expectation that I had to buy love, from the belief that I wasn't enough, and from a family that valued me only for what I could provide rather than who I was. As night fell, I sat in my apartment while the ambient light cast soft colors across my walls. Orch. The check was still on the kitchen counter, and the framed photo now rested on my bookshelf. Both symbols of a narrative being rewritten. A week ago, I thought being excluded on Christmas was the worst thing that could happen. I was wrong. The worst thing would have been staying silent, staying small, and continuing to serve as this family's emergency fund until I had nothing left to give. Orch. The message meant to break me became the exact authorization I needed to step away for good. Mom was still in the hospital. I didn't call. Dad sent progress updates, which I read without replying. Victoria would reach out when I was ready. The funds would be repaid, the liabilities cleared, and my credit profile restored. More importantly, the cycle was broken. Orch. I used to think family meant endless sacrifice, giving until you were completely drained. Now I know better. True support doesn't keep score, and it certainly doesn't take advantage. Refusing to be exploited isn't a betrayal. It's self-preservation and self-respect. It's choosing yourself for once. My sister texted me on December 21st to say, "We don't need you." She was right. They didn't need me. Orch. But what she didn't realize, and what none of them understood, was that I didn't need them either, and that was the most empowering realization of all. Orch. If you're hearing this story around the holidays or on any ordinary day, and you recognize a piece of your own life in it. If you've been the one constantly giving while others only take, or if you've ever wondered if setting a boundary makes you the bad guy, it doesn't. You have the right to establish boundaries. You have the right to protect your own stability. And you have every right to walk away from dynamics where your worth is tied solely to what you provide. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment below. Let me know if you've ever had to draw a firm line with someone who was supposed to care for you unconditionally. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they aren't alone. If you want to hear more stories about resilience, boundaries, and standing firm in your self-worth, consider subscribing to the channel. Your story matters, and you deserve to be valued for who you are, not just what you can offer. My name is Hannah Brooks. I'm 34 years old, and this Christmas I finally learned what it means to be free. Thank you for watching and listening. Remember, sometimes the people who say they don't need you are just afraid you'll realize you don't need them either. Merry Christmas, and here's to reclaiming your freedom.